The big question, what has sparked this fire in Manipur? Who will be held accountable? Can the centre and the state governments escape blame? Have old fault lines been reignited? I'm joined a short while ago by G.K. Pillai, former Home Secretary and an expert on the Northeast. Veena Lakshmi Nepram is an activist who's been working in the Northeast. Dr. Thongrolal Haukip is Assistant Professor for the Center for the Study of Law and Governance at JNU. He's a former advisor of the Cookie Students Organization. And Kaushik Deka is Executive Editor, India Today magazine, and also handles India Today Northeast. And Rajat Sethi was former advisor to the Manipur Chief Minister. So lots of voices. I want to go to Mr. G.K. Pillai, who, as I said, I spoke to earlier. And I began by asking him, Mr. Pillai, what makes Manipur such a difficult state to govern that every time we think peace is returning, we have another flare-up? What explains the latest flare-up according to you?
Well, Manipur has been having problems for quite some time. The problem between the valley people, in the Meiteis, and the hill tribes has been there for quite some decades. And they have not been able to come to any conclusion or a dialogue which has not opened. So the lack of a dialogue has actually created suspicions among the communities. And in recent weeks, a number of developments have taken place which have aggravated these suspicions. And the violence that broke out a few days ago is actually the culmination of some things which have been happening in the last few weeks.
I'll come to and I'll give the viewers an explainer of what exactly is happening in Manipur. But before that, do you think, Mr. Pillai, there was a failure on the part of the government and the police, or was this an intelligence failure that failed to detect the simmering tensions between the Meiteis, who are dominant in the Imphal Valley, and the Cookies in the hill areas?
Well, for all people who were, looking at Manipur in the last few weeks, it was very obvious that tensions were building up. You had the cases of where even the chief minister's function at Churachandpur. You had an issue of where the encroachment in Churachandpur was attempted to be removed by the Manipur government, and there was objection to that. So we've seen this little bit of violence which has been coming. And I think the Manipur government, in one sense, failed to act, to realize, to take note of these signals and take preventive steps to see that the situation didn't deteriorate to such an extent where you had these large-scale, I should say, ethnic clashes which have taken place, which is very unfortunate.
What is the way forward, given that 50 people have died, thousands rendered homeless, Mr. Pillai? How should the government, in your view, restore peace in the state? Is it just getting in greater army presence, or does it require more than that?
I think the most immediate thing is to make sure that there is no further law and order situation. You have to make sure that the law and order situation is completely under control. You have to make sure that those who have been affected are rehabilitated, compensated for the damage that has been caused to their shops, to their vehicles, and so on and so forth, so that some element of trust. Those who have left their houses, their shops, and so on, in all areas, should be able to go back, and all-party meetings will have to be held to encourage that. And once this process is done, then I think, or simultaneously itself, the state government should start a dialogue with all concerned parties to try and find a solution which is, in one sense, a long-term solution to the whole issue, all the issues. Land issue, you got issue of their rights on the forest rights. You got issues of encroachment in the forest. You got issues of their own forest rights, which the tribal communities have. All these have to be now put on the table, discussed, a solution found. We've got even the refugees who have come across from Myanmar as a result of the civil war there. how to handle them, where they have to be settled. They obviously have to be settled in refugee camps. They can't encroach on the forests. So all these issues have to be taken up and discussed in the open, and not allow tensions to come up. And this requires some element of goodwill and, what shall I say, statesmanship from the leaders of all the communities in Manipur.
That was G.K. Pillai speaking to me. He is a foremost expert on this area. I'm going to go to all my guests, but I just want to do an explainer for our viewers who perhaps want to know more about Manipur itself. First, take a look at the demography and then the flashpoints. The demography is simply this. The Meiteis are largely a Hindu community, mostly based in the plains in and around Imphal. They are 57% of the state's population, but account for about 10 to 15% of the land area in the Imphal Valley. The Naga and Kuki tribes are largely Christian. They're 37% of the state's population, but they account for about 85% of the land area, and they enjoy scheduled tribe status. Now, what are the flashpoints that have taken place? Now, the High Court ordered the inclusion of the Meiteis last month in the ST list as scheduled tribes. The Kuki tribals believe that as a result, they will lose out. They don't want the Meiteis to be included in the SC list. There's also the problem of illegal immigrants, migrants, which Mr. Pillai explained, crossing over from Myanmar, which is also strife torn. They are settling in the hills as tribals. Meitei say this migration from Myanmar will alter the state's demography. You've also got poppy cultivation taking place in some parts, which again is leading to friction between tribals and non-tribal groups. So, Beena Lakshmi Nepram, how do you explain what's happened in the last few days? We thought Manipur was limping towards normalcy, was relatively peaceful when elections took place last year. Now these old fault lines re-emerging. Who do you hold accountable?
Yes, first of all, Rajdeep, our hearts are broken. We mourn with the families whose so many innocent 60 lives have been lost, 1,700 houses burned. For the last 5 days, we have been absolutely heartbroken and strongly condemn the violence. This is a very new case of what I call violent extremism. Violent extremism reeling its head in Manipur right again. Yes, Manipur has been seeing fault lines, but Manipur has been a land of diversity, of diverse communities living side by side for decades, for centuries. And why this flashpoint, Rajdeep? It's very, very clear. Right now, I've been conducting research in this area, working with women groups for the last 20 years of my life. Right now, common people want to live in peace. Common people across ethnic divides. This is a conflict engineered, and I say engineered by a few which are close to guns, drugs, and political power. I repeat this. This is a conflict engineered by a few. Let's remember that next year is general elections. We have been seeing so much of violent extremist groups coming up in Manipur in the past 1 to 2 years, who have been talking about how to protect. So yes, there are serious concerns in the hills of Manipur, how they have been discriminated, mistreated. And as Mr. Pillai said, we have a lot to do. But what is also critical is the fact that many indigenous communities, the word tribal, non-tribal, all these, again, are the fault lines of the remnants of colonial rule, in which divide and rule has been led to many of our communities. Rajdeep, today, Naga, Kuki, Meitei, Assamese, and we do not understand each other because the history of each other has never been in the textbooks of the region or the country. I have been advocating the need for understanding by sharing truth-telling, by sharing our concerns, but neither the government, neither in the center nor the state listen to the voices of women, of scholars in our region.
Ma'am, you are saying it is engineered. What explains the fact that Meiteis and Kukis have been killing each other? I mean, who is engineering it? Are you telling me these are outsiders? Are you telling me that these are powerful? Who are the individuals? Citizens are being killed. Who is responsible?
This is why I'm saying those who are connected with gun running, drug trafficking, and those who are close to power have engineered this violence, Rajdeep. because
You're saying
common
ordinary
people have been
citizens do
living.
not want it. You're saying ordinary cookies,
No.
ordinary Meiteis, ordinary Nagas do not.
No.
You're not telling me that the quotas that were given to Meiteis are responsible for this. Cookies are angry that Meiteis are going to get benefits that were otherwise they hoped to get.
Yes, as you see, India and parts of Manipur, many parts, we are living under democracy. Anyone, if they have a right, they want to demand something, they can go to the right authorities. And then whoever other authorities decide through a due process, we cannot take law into our own hands. Manipur has not seen, protest where many of our armed groups, so this is what's happening. Many of our armed groups have been what we call underground cadres. They've been hiding in the hills, they've been hiding across the border. But on the 3rd, for the first time, armed men with AK-47 and 56 rifles were in the rally. In which the burning end started, which has resulted in a panic and resulting in mob violence. Again, these are engineered, and we call upon those who have engineered this violence.
You've used that word 4 times or 5 times, that this violence was engineered. I want to understand, therefore, Kaushik Deka, you have tracked the Northeast more than anyone else possibly in the national media in recent times. Who has engineered this violence that Beena Lakshmi is talking about? Is it been engineered, as she seems to suggest, by armed groups who have exploited the situation, the tensions that exist on the ground? You're on mute.
By armed groups.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. It's definitely engineered, as she has suggested, that armed groups are responsible for this recent violence. Because if you have to understand that the people in the Northeast, not only in Manipur, any common citizen, he or she would want development, jobs, progress in the region. They are not into violence. Now, as you have mentioned that Meitei demanding ST rights triggered this violence, it's not exactly like that. There is a whole genesis to the violence. You have to understand why there was a drive by the government against poppy cultivation, then why there were involvement of, as she mentioned, Beena Lakshmi mentioned, that armed insurgent groups in triggering the violence, why the decision of the High Court asking the state government to recommend ST status to the Meitei that came in mid-April, either 14th or 15th, I don't exactly remember the date, but why the violence happened on May 3rd. And there was several kinds of violence that was happening in Churachandpur area. Why those things were happening? There was it was leading up to what culminated on May 3. But we cannot just see it as a tribal versus the Meitei conflict. There are many other layers to this conflict where I believe to some extent the state government also failed to anticipate or triggered. But more than that, you have to understand those other issues of influx, poppy cultivation, and the substitute. It's okay to launch a drive against poppy cultivation or to launch a drive against drugs. But also we have to understand the problems of the poor poppy cultivators, what alternative we can offer to them. So there was a bigger need for everyone, all the stakeholders to come together instead of taking very hostile stand against each other.
You're saying it was not just tribal versus non-tribal. There's the poppy cultivation, there is encroachment, there's illegal immigrants. All of that come together and then are exploited by armed groups. But was the state caught napping? Because, Rajat Sethi, one of the reasons why the BJP won the last election was they claimed they had brought peace to Manipur. But now these old fault lines emerge and the government seems to have been caught napping. The Home Minister of the country is campaigning in Karnataka and the Chief Minister for a long time didn't seem to be fully in control over what was happening.
Well, Rajdeep ji, I first of all want to offer my condolences to the families who have lost their loved ones. I spent some of the most formative years of my life, 5 years, serving as the advisor to the Chief Minister there, which throughout these 5 years we ensured that we worked together with various communities. There were so many buffer groups, civil societies that we kept engaging with. And, I learned a lot based on my experience working there. But there are 2 or 3 observations which I want to make it clear for your viewers as well. First thing is that, see, nobody naps over these things. This has been truly a historic rioting or communal tensions that has happened in Manipur. It is the Home Minister who called the state leadership, Chief Minister, along with the entire cabinet, every 2 hours. He was campaigning, but every 2 hours he used to get onto a call, get onto a video call, and ensured that the required instructions are being passed on.
No, but was there an intelligence failure? I mean, surely violence of this scale should have been anticipated.
Well, this is the second point that I was coming to, that Manipur in an engineering language, it's a society which is in a classic state of an unstable equilibrium. The equilibrium can fool one that there is permanent peace there. But what I've learned from this entire incident and the way it has quickly unraveled into one of the worst communal tensions is that you cannot take peace for granted in Manipur. This is for sure, and this is where I want to point out to the third thing which has so far been missed. It is the role of the judiciary. Whenever you bypass the soft, delicate process of legislative exercise of churning within the society and coming to rules and regulations, and the judiciary thinks that they are smart enough, all due respect to them, they want to preempt that process. They want to preempt the long process of legislative exercises, and they come out and drop a bomb on the society, and the society doesn't get a time to adjust to it.
So you're saying the High Court sudden decision to give, no, you're saying the High Court sudden decision to give ST status to the Meitei.
This is the classic purview of the legislature. It is the legislative body of all these elected MLAs need to constantly do that churning within the society, make the cookies comfortable, find the middle ground with the Meitei community. None of the demands either of the Meiteis or the cookies and the Nagas is wrong here. It's just that finding the common ground where the political leadership has to come into full. It cannot be the judiciary bypassing the political processes over and over and over again. And this point has been overlooked. There are other issues. I understand that poppy is an issue. You have to go after poppy cultivation no matter the consequences. One has to have an iron hand policy. Otherwise, you know, there are so many youngsters in Manipur and in elsewhere. You know, Manipur's poppy cultivation results in opium and heroin. It reaches all the way to Punjab. That's the channel. If you do not stop that, you're pushing the entire country into the mess of drugs. India and northeastern part especially lies in the shadows of Golden Triangle, which is Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, wherein you see massive drugs being moved around.
You know, therefore you are saying you've got armed groups, you've got the drug problem, you've got illegal immigrants, you've got the lack of a political dialogue, all of it coming together, and of course old fault lines that have existed, a sense of mistrust. Dr. Tondiyal, you know, Dr. Hauke, as a cookie, as someone who's advised cookie groups in the past, are the cookies really caught in this, you know, in these various complex issues at the moment? It's their land which is often being used for poppy cultivation, where there are encroachments taking place. The old cookie militant groups have apparently resurfaced. Are ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire? I'm told your family members are safe, but a number of people around you in Churachandpur particularly have now sought refuge in different parts of the country.
Rajdeep, thank you for having me. Let me start by saying how there is a building of certain narrative which is going on. You know, the narrative is that they demonize a certain community, particularly the cookie community. You know, it's going on and on for the last 2-3 years. But we have been, you know, the cookie communities, particularly the civil society organizations, the leaders, have been cooperative to the government, for instance, in terms of poppy cultivation. We never discuss about why these people are cultivating poppy. And for instance, there's no proper roads in the hills, there's no sanitation, there's no medical facilities, no schools.
So is the anger the fact that the cookies feel their areas have not got the same benefits that Imphal Valley has? Is that where it starts off? A sense of alienation, of anxiety. Is that what it is?
Look into how the funds are spent in Manipur. You will find that 70% of the funds from Delhi, you know, which we get it as a grants, is spent, you know, only, you know, dedicatedly on the valley areas. Look into the institutions, universities, colleges, hospitals. You know, all these institutions are located in Imphal. Then when there is a complaint that why these institutions are not located in the hills, there is no answer. People got angry. Why do you question that? these are the kind of...
So you're saying these simmering issues have existed and then they get triggered by the fact that Meiteis are now going to get ST status. Am I correct? And then various other groups, including armed insurgents, start playing a role. Beena Lakshmi says it was engineered.
I think this, looking to the nature of how things are unfolding, the riot, how it started appears to be a kind of political machination, from the, top to bottom. So we have to look into this, not only...
Politics of divide and rule.
No, a kind of how this has been engineered. I would blame another, another political, angle, but, this has been engineered for long.
Okay, so, you're hitting an important point. This is the problem, Beena Lakshmi. The fact is the Northeast is complex. There are no easy solutions. There are ethnic fault lines that have existed for years. A few years ago, it was Nagas versus Kukis. Now we are finding Meiteis versus Kukis. I mean, what is the way forward? Can all these groups sit across a dialogue table as one hopes, as Rajat Sethi suggested, and resolve it?
Absolutely, Rajdeep. That's why in 2010, we started the Northeast India Women Initiative for Peace, because our men are busy picking up arms and fighting with each other, and in the process, women and children. I started the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network to help thousands of women, 20,000 women, who belong to the Kuki, Naga, Meitei, Manipuri Muslims, whose husbands, whose brothers, whose fathers have been killed in the 7 decades of conflict, which has been a part of our region, which is still under a martial law, Rajiv. So we, the women, across Manipur, during this past days, we have been in constant communication, helping each other across ethnic divides to tell our men that you cannot keep fighting like this. It is only us who continue, the women and children. Right now, 20,000 people are now in hostage-like situation, which in Torbung and other parts where even the Indian Army can't reach. We have to ensure right now proper relief and rehabilitation, get the hostages which are now trapped in many of the communal sensitive areas, ensure that the government of Manipur and the government of India stop this violent extremism. We know election is 2021. Our brother, Kuki brother, said
you're linking it. I'm going to stop you for a moment. You're linking it to the elections. You have to go because we have another guest joining us in a moment. But Rajat Sethi, the politics that has been played, I come back to it. Why couldn't the Chief Minister have called for a dialogue between these groups and sat them across a table?
Well, this is where I fail to understand. It's one thing to, it's an easy target to constantly blame the politician because they are the easiest punching bags here. But let me tell you, initial triggers of violence has been going on in Churachandpur for the past 1.5 to 2 months. Various groups, be it the Paites, the Valtes, and all of these small groups within the larger Kuki Zo community had been in discussion under various ages along with the Chief Minister and the state government. Their concerns were towards threefold. First thing was around surveys of the forest. There were concerns that reserved forests are being occupied by the villagers in the hills, and that needs to be cleared through the survey process. There was opposition, a violent opposition to that. So there was these build-up happening, and then the constant buffer mechanism was being kicked in, and it started playing its role. But then, you see then an external trigger happens.
Right.
Because of this judgment came in, and then ARTSOM, which is the All-Tribal Student Union of Manipur, all the tribes, Manipur's, the Nagas and the Kukis got together and organized a huge protest. When you organize a very big protest, and even one stray incident in a tinderbox situation like that of Manipur can really blow up the situation really fast.
Okay.
And I think what happened was that in the last 2 or 3 days, in the run-up to that ARTSOM, some intelligence could have been pulled in that ARTSOM is organizing such a large event, and there is a possibility of something wrong happening.
Okay.
Perhaps that's a couple of signals were missed, and the whole state burned because of that. But let me tell you again, post that, the Home Minister and as far as I know, I've been in touch with various government officials. He has been on phone call every 2 hours. I mean, of course, he's not going to announce it to the media every time he gets onto a call.
Right.
But everybody has been hands-on when it came to this violence, because everybody knows there has been Naga Kuki genocide in the 90s, which resulted in a similar flare-up. So you know exactly that Manipur is in that classic case of a very, very unstable equilibrium.
You use the word tinderbox. You use the word tinderbox, and many will believe Manipur remains on a tinderbox that can explode at any time. We can only hope that some of those flames that are now slowly being doused are now met with a sustained dialogue. I have to end here. Yes, one very last point. Yes, Dr. Thani.
Yeah, these riots doesn't happen at this scale, often, and we have to be careful. There has to be a kind of impartial inquiry how it started.
You all want an impartial inquiry as to who is responsible for it.
There has to be accountability at the top, and some political solution has to be there. There are demands that has been going on. For instance, the 6th schedule extension in the hill areas. It has been going on for 45 years, and this has been opposed in the valley. Why are you unwilling to share power? There is no state. For instance, there is a demand for Kukiland or, for instance, southern Nagaland. But why can't you show within the state, for instance, the extension of 6th schedule in the
You're talking of problems that have existed now for decades. Those problems need solutions. Those problems cannot be settled overnight. And as we've been saying, Manipur remains on a tinderbox. And it's been extremely unfortunate what we've seen unraveling there. I repeat, if this had happened in any other part of the country, it would be breaking news hour after hour. Manipur, sadly, internet cut off, much more difficult to get news from the ground. We can only hope that normalcy and peace return sooner rather than later. Thank you all very much for joining me on my big story.